For as long as most of us can remember, there's only ever been one game to choose if you want to simulate a life, raise a virtual family, climb the corporate ladder, and get into quirky misadventures. The Sims is the life simulation game. There have been outliers and smaller offerings, but nothing has come along to knock it off its perch. But the tide is turning, and a challenger has appeared. Life by You has seen the lucrative market and said, hey, I want a piece of that. So, for fans of the Sims franchise, enjoyers of simulation games, and anyone who just likes a little David versus Goliath story, let's have a look at how The Sims managed to become synonymous with the genre, why there haven't been any challenges till now, and what a new face means for the future of life simulation games. Alright, so I don't want to bog this all down with a history lesson, but how The Sims came around is pretty crucial to understanding why it's so massive. Despite dominating the genre, it wasn't actually the first of its kind. The concept kind of started in the early 70s with a program made by British mathematician John Horton Conway. This is the game of life. And I said kind of because although this is a life simulation, it isn't really a game, ironically enough. You'd put in the parameters and then let the simulation run its course. A decade and a half later though, something else came along with the sole purpose of just being a little bit of fun. Little Computer People, which, believe it or not, was made by Activision. This sparked a niche, and over the next decade or so, other developers put their own spin on the formula. They made virtual pet games, evolution sims, and dove into genetic algorithms to shape this into a genre where artificial intelligence was front and center. The style of game was gaining traction, but there wasn't anything to deliver that knockout punch. Not until The Sims came along. But it didn't have an easy start. Game designer Will Wright had found success with SimCity, but he wanted to go bigger, whilst also going smaller. His idea was a virtual dollhouse, inspired by when he lost his home in the Oakland firestorm of 1991. Your virtual people would get jobs, decorate their houses, fall in love, get married, have children, grow old and die, etc, etc, yeah, you know what I mean. The board of directors at Maxis weren't convinced. They didn't want to put the game in production, and so the dream died. Briefly. In 1997, Maxis was bought out by Electronic Arts, and they were much more receptive to the concept and went full steam ahead on Wright's virtual dollhouse idea. Yep, back in the day, EA came along and enabled studios instead of shutting them down. Ah, how times have changed. The first Sims game came out in 2000. And it was leagues ahead of anything before it. Little Computer People may have written the formula, but The Sims perfected it. It wasn't just big in the niche world of life simulation games, it was ginormous altogether. It became the biggest selling PC game of all time. And that momentum kept building, with 7 expansion packs offering players new options, adventures, and situations for their virtual folk. And then in 2004, it got an even bigger sequel. It utilised a full 3D space, where the original was basically a diametric projection, which means it looked 3D, but it wasn't 3D. You probably hear people talk about isometric games here and there. This is like that, but there's a difference in viewing angles. Anyway, doesn't matter. The game introduced aspirations, wants, hopes, fears, and dreams. It made a player's Sims feel less like cardboard cutouts and more like actual people. Things progressed further with a whole bevy of expansions and content packs. 5 years later, and The Sims 3 came along. This time they added an open, seamless neighborhood. Sims got wishes and goals, and their pursuit of these helped guide the gameplay. It broke records left and right, and became the biggest PC game launch in history. Its success carried on long into the game's lifetime, with nearly a dozen expansions. The Sims had cemented itself as the game to play if you wanted to play out your digital livelihood. It broke out of gaming circles and became rooted in the mainstream. There was even a film in the works at one point, although it's probably best for all of us that that never happened. So, The Sims being the go-to is nothing new. Things have been like that since it first entered the scene, and every subsequent release has improved, upgraded, and refined the experience. Its current version, The Sims 4, is no exception. It is an undeniable powerhouse. The Sims 4 doesn't look like it's going anywhere, and its developers are working on something else as well, Project Renee. But this isn't a follow-up. It's an alternative. It will be free to play and cooperative, a bit of a different take on the genre. And it's being developed alongside the main game. Over the years, they've adopted certain strategies between releases. The obvious one is expansions. The Sims 1 had 7, which was a hell of a lot back then. The Sims 4 has double that already, as well as a whole host of game packs, stuff packs, kits, and additional content. To get the full package, it's going to cost you a heck of a lot more than a pretty penny. There's also their history of releasing a concept in one version of the game, removing it from the sequel, and selling it back as an expansion later on. I mean, how many times have Sims fans over the years had to buy a pet expansion, or the ability to have proper seasons in the game? We all know it's going to be a feature, so why not just put it in from the start? Money. The answer is always money. It's frustrating, and worse still, there wasn't anything anyone could do about it, because there weren't any true alternatives. Well, there were alternatives, but they seem to be taking a different direction. They leaned into social simulation or farming simulation to offer something different, whilst not actively competing with The Sims. Those that used that same formula were often much smaller, and in most cases fell almost entirely into obscurity immediately. I mean, do you remember playing any of them? Let me know in the comments. In fact, the only games that really offered a proper tried and true alternative to The Sims were spin-offs to the main series of The Sims, such as My Sims, Sims Medieval, The Sims Bustin' Out. The Sims loomed at the top of the genre like Goliath, and no one could stop it. But now, finally, someone's going to have a try. Life by You offers a lot of features that will excite players looking for an alternative, or those who want a life sim but aren't content paying The Sims 4's premiums. It features an open world with no loading screens. Your creation won't spout some gibberish nonsense language, but they'll be able to understand you. You can customize their dialogue paths to change what they say.
Let's see how this goes. Okay, he failed chemistry.
Alter their mannerisms and tweak their personalities. You'll design their home, their town, and the world around them. Open businesses, start a family, create, design, and fine-tune their perfect jobs. It's touted as being limitless and giving power back to the players, and it's doing that in a very interesting way. It's making the game as moddable as possible. If there's an aspect you don't like, change it. Don't like the way the furniture looks? Make it look different. Whereas The Sims has made its strategy out of selling options and customization through packs and kits, Life by You is giving the players the freedom to alter the game as they see fit. While it might look a little rough around the edges, the game has some real chops. The development is being led by Rod Humble. You may not know that name, but he was the former executive vice president of EA Play, as well as the head of the Sims label. Yep, they know the competition, and it looks like they're ready to scrap. I've already dropped a few references here and there, and you might see that I'm trying to build this David v Goliath story. But here's the twist. That's not what this is. Life by You is by Paradox, a giant in the grand strategy and historical simulation genre. So this isn't a scrappy underdog story. This is Goliath versus a slightly different Goliath on vacation. So how does this play out? Well, either these two giants duke it out, with one emerging victorious and the other bowing out of the race, in which case I'd put my money on The Sims sticking around. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. See, I don't think there just has to be one life simulation game. And they don't have to interest the same people. The Sims has something very appealing. Yes, it's got the formula perfected, but it's also just bright, quirky, and silly and whimsical. Life by You, on the other hand, will appeal to those who like to get under the hood and have a little tinker. It's more malleable. It has mods to change the game and provide replayability. Whilst there are similarities, there are also enough differences for the two to coexist. So, there'll be a choice for players, with a very clear and even split. Wouldn't that be lovely and simple? If only there wasn't a third game. Yep, also entering the fray is this, Paralives. And it seems to fall right between The Sims and Life by You. It's very stylized, looks great, and has loads of character. One complaint I do have about Life by You is that it doesn't look great. This doesn't have this problem. I love it. Paralives will provide plenty of options in terms of building and living, a sense of fine-tuning and micromanagement that will appeal to those who are nodding along as I was describing Paradox's offering. But unlike the others, this isn't a game from another massive studio. It's made by a solo developer, Alex Massey. Here's the scrappy underdog in this situation. It's now David versus Goliath, all in a cage together. Now, this won't be as all-encompassing as The Sims. The dev has stated that he doesn't want to go down the route of churning out expansions. Instead, he wants to provide some free updates, and maybe, once in a while, a little DLC. So it looks like this will have a lower barrier to entry, especially compared to the $1,000 price tag for all that Sims 4 content. Yeah, that really is how much you have to spend. And it keeps getting bigger too. Life by You, we can't know for sure yet, but it is a Paradox game. Take a look at EU4 or Stellaris or Hearts of Iron, and you'll see that they too love the DLC strategy. Will they out EA with all this? Guess we'll see. All in all, it's a pretty exciting time. We spent over 20 years with only one life simulation game. If you didn't like it, tough. Go down the farming sim or social sim route, or play something that just wasn't very good. But soon, the doors will be blown wide open. The Sims 4 will stick around and be there for people who just like that. Project Renee will come along and offer a Sims experience with a multiplayer twist. Life by You will be there for anyone who likes to really get stuck in and play with the parameters of life. And Paralives will sit at the table as an indie darling, offering a smaller but tighter experience with a lower barrier of entry. Life by You is expecting an early access launch in 2024, and we'll probably hear more about Paralives by then too. Which one you go for is completely up to you. You could pick all of them, you could pick none. You could stick to your Animal Crossings, your Stardew Valleys, your Dincoms if you prefer that direction. The point is, you'll have a choice, and that's excellent. So, do we think these games have what it takes to compete in the same spaces as The Sims? Will EA start to pick up the pace and try to leave these newcomers in the dust? Let me know in the comments how you think the next few years in the genre will play out. We'd love to hear your thoughts.